Greetings, brethren of the heavy, and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George, and today I've got something, again, totally different for you. I'm actually going to be taking a look at some of my favourite compilation albums. Now, a lot of these compilation albums I sort of revisited or rediscovered, should I say, while I was searching through my collection for my favourite EPs, because as other collectors out there will know, EPs and bonus content, singles, mini releases, whatever, they do tend to get banded together, chucked together and released as a compilation of these extra tracks, these outside of the studio album tracks, as this standalone piece, this compilation to kind of tie up all those loose ends, make that material accessible. And actually, I discovered, to my shock and horror and amazement, as a person that would never actually intentionally go out and buy the latest best of album or the hits albums of whoever it may be, that actually there are some bloody good compilations out there. Certainly when it comes to those compilations of the bonus material, the EPs and the loose ends. So, we'll start off. I've got 3 compilations here that are, in my opinion, some of the best. So this first one was actually my introduction to the band, and this particular copy, which I had commandeered from my dad years ago and have pretty much forgotten about it since, really was my introduction to Motorhead with No Remorse. This great compilation, originally released in 1984, I believe. This is a fantastic listen, and although this is essentially a best of, covering those first classic golden years across Bronze Records, we've also got some new tracks as well, and a couple of live versions as well in there. But this absolutely blew my mind as an early teen. Hearing this, it was like, this is so raw, this is so heavy, this is so fast and aggressive. This was the perfect headbanging music. This was so energetic. This was so full of life. And it really, really did blow my mind. And I do quite clearly remember my dad saying, if you like all that fast stuff, that more aggressive stuff, you'll probably like Motorhead. And it was not wrong. Years down the line, I'm still listening, still loving Motorhead. So, let's take a look at some of these tracks then. We've got the likes of Ace of Spades there. We have a top-notch version, live version of Motorhead, that classic title track. Jailbait, great track that is. Stay Clean. You get some of the better moments of Overkill thrown in through here. The only thing that's actually missing, in fact, is Damage Case. We've also got Too Late, the live version, which was featured on the Golden Years EP, the 7-inch or 12-inch EP, live EP that they've released on Bronze. Then we've got, again, I think we've got a live version of Bomber as well. But it was hearing a track like Iron Fist and Shine that just, you've got that melody, that groove, that aggression in the music. It just blew my mind. It was so good. Metropolis, easily one of my favourite Motorhead tracks, and certainly one of my favourite tracks from the mighty Overkill. Snaggletooth, an original track, a new track, a heavy, fast track that is. We've got the slightly shortened cut single version, I should say, of Overkill, but it's still good, still heavy stuff. Then we've got Please Don't Touch, and also we've got Emergency from that St. Valentine's Day Massacre EP, which featured works with Girls' School. Stone Dead Forever, great stuff. Steal Your Face, another original track. Iron Horse and We Are the Road Crew. You've got some killer material here. This is a compilation album which is absolutely well worth hearing, well worth having. Motorhead, 1984, I believe. No Remorse, and it shows absolutely no remorse. It's a perfect summary of that period of the band, with the exception, I would probably say, of Dead Men Tell No Tales and, of course, Damage Case. However, that aside, it's a bloody good listen. Change of style altogether. This compilation, Pagan Fire from 2008, is essentially a compilation of folk and Viking albums and bands, very different stuff. We've got black metal, melodic death metal, we've got troll metal, we've got it all thrown in here. And actually, it's bloody brilliant. All those elements, the folky elements, the symphonic elements, thrown in. This compilation was my introduction to quite a lot of different bands featured across here. But we've got Bathory opening up the album with, well, Song to Haul Up High, which is, in my opinion, not one of my favourite Bathory songs. I'm not a huge Bathory fan because I just haven't delved very deeply into their catalogue, but it's a very slow, mournful piece, which does provide a good intro to the rest of the album, but it's not a great moment. But when we get into Enslaved and Unleashed, The Long Ships Are Coming, is a freaking fantastic track. Keep this PG. Amon Amarth, Victorious March, one of the heaviest Amon Amarth tracks, certainly from their early years, their very aggressive death metal years, before they sort of lean towards more traditional heavy metal styles. It's a freaking great song, really heavy, very raw, very emotive stuff. We've got Winter Sun with Winter Madness, a fantastic song. Brilliant band and a fantastic song there. We've got Fintroll, we've got Equilibrium. My introduction to Moon Sorrow was from this album, as was my introduction to Primordial. But then we've also got Elovite, we've got Corpiclani on here as well. We've got Ensiferum. I was introduced to Falkenbach through this as well. But just the whole compilation, I should say. Got Churasas as well, not forgetting there, and Thjörfing. But you know what? This is just a brilliant album to be honest, I listen to it in the car quite a lot. But you put it on and it's a tour of folk, of black, of symphonic, of death metal. But it's so fitting. And that cover, you can't really fault it. Pagan Fire, a fantastic compilation, and is a great introduction to some more obscure bands that you may not necessarily come across. The likes of Amon Amarth, of course, they're going to be a little bit more accessible than Fintroll, for example. But I would say that is a superb compilation. Gonna go obscure here. We're gonna go deep and nasty into the catalogue of a band that transitioned from grindcore to old school death metal, to melodic death metal, to death and roll, and then back into just good old gritty death metal. I am, of course, talking about Carcass, and this is Wake Up and Smell the Carcass, with that absolutely grotesque cover there. Of course, we shan't go into too much details about that, but this was released in 1996, and this is one of those releases that tied up a lot of loose ends. This is a great summary of those extra album tracks, of those EPs. Again, as I mentioned earlier, some of the best tracks are found on the EPs, and this collection of EPs and outside of the full-length album material is some of the best stuff you can hear. We've got the first 5 tracks there from the Swan Song sessions. So those were extra tracks from that session of the Swan Song album, which was the last album, full-length album they recorded, which was very much a death and roll album before they separated for about 17 years, I think it was. But some of those tracks are brilliant. Edge of Darkness, Emotional Flatline, Ever Increasing Circles, and what a brilliant title that is. I told you, corporate rock really does suck. It certainly does. But that is a great EP. Then we've got some Radio 1 rock show sessions, which is 4 live tracks. We've got Buried Dreams, No Love Lost, Rock and Roll, and Edge of Darkness. Now, for the train spotters out there and the dedicated Carcass fans, I would say No Love Lost is possibly better than the studio version, but it is such an absolute treat because the intro to that track is in fact that absolutely crushing intro to the classic Ruptured and Purulence from the Symphonies of Sickness album, their second album. It's an absolute groove death machine, and we get some great live versions of those extra album tracks alongside the great Buried Dreams from Heartwork. Then we've got some tracks from the Heartwork EP as well. This Is Your Life and Rock and Roll. Great tracks, very death and roll, but very heavy, very groovy stuff. Going back a few years to 1991 in fact, we've got the Tools of the Trade EP with the title track there, as well as, I'm not even going to try and pronounce it, but in brackets, Still Rotten to the Gore, and then we've got Hepatic Tissue Fermentation 2 as well, Part 2, The Return. Great old school death metal tracks, heavy as hell, just brilliant stuff. Really good, very much of that era, of that time, certainly what the band were doing with their third album, and it just sounds great. So we're going back even further for the last few tracks because we have Genital Grinder 2 and Hepatic Tissue Fermentation, the first part, from the Pathological compilation, and then Exhume to Consume, the classic Carcass track from the Grind Crusher compilation. So we've got some great tracks there. Really brilliant material. Just a great compilation of Carcass's extra album tracks. Certainly not one to miss for fans of old school death metal and just Carcass in general, to be honest. So, to recap, the great rock and roll gods, Motorhead, the Speed Machines with No Remorse, a fantastic compilation. We've got Pagan Fire taking you into the obscure extreme metal world with all of these folky, symphonic and black metal leaning bands, and old school grindcore death metal, death and roll hybrid they are, Carcass with Wake Up and Smell the Carcass. A great compilation. So, what do you think of these particular compilations? If you're not familiar with them, check them out, because no doubt you will find at least a few moments that are absolutely worth hearing and may indeed convert you if you're not a fan already. Let me know what you think. I'm very interested to hear. You take care, my friends. Thank you very much for watching, and feel free to like and subscribe as always. Check back soon for more reviews and recommendations of all things heavy. Thanks for watching. Stay heavy.